Okay then, folks, I think we are good to begin. So, a huge welcome and thank you for joining us on today's Ravel Unravel Google Hangout. My name is Sean Rose, and I'm Project Interfaith's Training and Outreach Associate. And I'm delighted that we have this opportunity today to hear from three fantastic speakers who have used Ravel Unravel in their own contexts, to have a chance to think about ways that you can use Ravel Unravel in your context and to answer any questions that you might have today. So, a couple of reminders. I'm recording the Hangout today and we'll be posting it to our website and YouTube so that others who really wanted to be with us but couldn't join us at this time will be able to use it as a resource in future. And you can share questions and comments throughout the Hangout and after today using the hashtag RavelUnravel on Twitter. So before I hand over to our presenters, let me just give a brief introduction to Project Interfaith. I think most of you probably know a little about the organisation. We were founded almost 10 years ago. We're an education non-profit, and our mission is to grow understanding, respect, and relationships among people of all faiths, beliefs, and cultures. Our training, our programs, our services, both online and face-to-face, are all about building conversation skills and critical thinking skills of individuals and communities. And our hope is that they enable people to openly learn about and discuss diversity, to dispel myths about different religions, beliefs, and cultures, and to challenge stereotypes and misconceptions. And we work with schools and colleges across the country. We have staff in different parts of the US. I'm on the West Coast, and we have an office in Nebraska as well. Now, one of the things that we're really passionate about at Project Interfaith is the power of peer-to-peer learning. Hearing people who have used our programs, our resources, who have done this work in their own context, whether on a campus, or, in a school, in a community group, or elsewhere. And we're really excited that today we have this opportunity to hear from David Lewis, from Katie Gordon, and from Cesar Roman. They're going to be telling us a little more about how they have used Ravel Unravel in their context. I'll be guiding the conversation for the first part, and then we'll have a chance to hear questions and reflections from all of you. So, at this point, I'm going to pass over to our presenters, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, and then to tell us a little bit about what Ravel Unravel is, and how each of them used it in their own context. So why don't we start with David? Thanks, David.
Oh, thank you, Sean. Can everyone hear me okay? See me all right? Hi. I first became familiar, particularly with the Ravel Unravel project as part of Project Interfaith, when I attended an American Academy of Religion conference. I believe this was in roughly 2012. And at this conference, they had a nice small setup, but pretty much a camera ready to go and asking people just to talk about their identity, their religious identity. And I was deeply intrigued by this. I took part in it myself. It was a nice exercise to go through. But as one who is teaching about world religions, giving a survey of world religions class, teaching some courses on Islam and fiction, novels of the afterlife, at what is primarily a science-based college. This is MCPHS, Massachusetts College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences in Boston, Massachusetts. I was often faced with how to make this topic of religion, of religious identity, of practice, accessible to the students. And it struck me how accessible this experience had been at the conference for me. So once I got home, I decided that the next time I offer Survey of World Religions, I'd be certain to incorporate Ravel into the curriculum. Now, what made this more challenging but also a greater opportunity was that semester, spring of 2013, I believe, I was teaching servants online. So this gave another dimension to the course. This would be one of the only times that the students would be able to see each other. They would see me. I gave video lectures like this one, and I'd get very close to the camera, and I'll scare them. Um, I'd give video lectures and we would have chats, but this would be one of the few times that students would present themselves, and they'd be presenting themselves fully, not just a face, but also their thoughts on religion, religious identity, their upbringing, and so forth. The campaign was captured at the RavelUnravel website. I believe you can find it, Sean, if they look up MCPHS. And you can see all 47 very different entries from my students that semester. It was a great success. Everybody, got an A for it. I mean, just braving it. But I think it was really enriching and, forgive the cliche, eye-opening for students to see each other, hear from each other, and be challenged to talk about themselves and their religious identity, but in a non-confrontational settings. They could take as many takes as they needed. They could pre-script it. They could do it extemporaneously. It was marvelous, and that's why I'm so pleased to be part of this discussion today about how it worked for myself as well as other members here.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, David. Over to you, Katie. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. So this is an interesting segue because I also brought the RavelUnravel campaign to our campus, to a campus. It's at a university, but I did it as a staff member of an interfaith organization here. Like Sean said, my name is Katie Gordon, and I work for a nonprofit called the Kaufman Interfaith Institute that's housed at Grand Valley State University in Michigan. And so in this past, I've been working in just over a year, and RavelUnravel was one of the first things that I was sort of exposed to, first at the White House, the President's Community Service and Interfaith Campus Challenge White House gathering. They were doing the same thing as they were at AAR. They were just shooting videos, and I thought it sounded fun. So I did it myself, and I thought it would be a really interesting conversation starter on a campus. So over the next few months, I basically tried to get to know the layout of campus and who would be a kind of a partnering organization for the Kaufman Institute to work with. I think that's what made our campaign pretty unique, was that we did work with the university libraries, actually. And so the university libraries has a multimedia team. They have a video team where they're really interested in producing original content unique to Grand Valley, unique to student experiences, and videos that kind of encompass this cross-campus, cross-cultural engagement. So university libraries pulled together all of the logistical aspects of the Kaufman GVSU campaign, which included having just a really nice backdrop, having good quality videos, kind of sound effects in the videos and everything like that. So it was a very polished product, which I give full credit to the video team, who also helped me sign into this Google Hangout today, so that's very nice of them. And then from my angle as someone promoting interfaith dialogue, this was a conversation that we weren't having on campus. No one really talks about their faith very openly, and if they do, it's only in the context of their own faith organization or their own secular organization. And so since these conversations were happening in kind of isolated pockets, we wanted to use RavelUnravel as a way of people coming together to have that conversation in context of all of the diversity that campus has to offer. So yeah, that's just kind of the brief introduction to why we did it. And it really did spark a conversation and I think exposed people to other students on campus and other staff on campus who never really felt comfortable saying their identity beforehand, and then it kind of just brought it all out of the woodworks.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Katie. And Cesar, let's hear about how you've used RavelUnravel at Williams College. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So, am I good? Yeah. Audio fine. Yeah. All right. Cool. So, yeah. So my name is Cesar Roman. I'm a senior at Williams College, and this isn't on purpose. It just happened to be the best place in my common room for lighting. And yeah. So I think we used. So I guess I'll give a little backdrop. So we have had a group since 2009, I believe, and it experienced a lot of ups and downs. I think when the people that the two students that started it graduated, the interfaith group kind of just died down with them, and it's kind of like I saw this problem of like sustainability. How do we create a sustainable kind of group club on campus that kind of constantly addresses the changing culture at Williams? And so it started off there. I kind of took over the group, little coup d'etat, and I kind of just decided that I needed a board. I couldn't do this by myself, and so like started with the board, and then started with this question. Well, like how do we start building an interfaith community on campus? And much like what Katie said, this wasn't something that like a lot of people talked about very openly. Like religion and faith are very like sensitive topics and very like difficult to talk about, especially at a campus setting where like religion and faith is seen as not so intellectual, and so where intellect and like being able to discuss and defend beliefs is very, very valued. It's very difficult to do that with faith, and so what I wanted to do was start, give them a safe space on campus where we could have those conversations, and we could maybe like one day tackle difficult questions like race and religion, politics and religion, gender and religion. So I thought that starting something like the RavelUnravel campaign would be like a nice kind of cool, quick kind of event to get the word out that the interfaith group was indeed alive. And so the way that I learned about RavelUnravel was I was part of a religious diversity leadership workshop at Hartford Seminary for the last 2 summers. I first went there in the summer of 2013, I can't remember, and I came back as an intern this past summer, and got to meet really awesome people. That's where I met Katie, actually. And that's where I met Beth Katz, who's the founder, I guess, of Project Interfaith, and spoke with her, and she was fantastic. And she's like, "Oh, look!" I was like, "Oh, that's awesome! I'll bring that back to campus," and I did. And I started out with like a goal of about 10 to 15 people. I thought that would be like a pretty substantial group. We actually ended up getting a total of 36 interviews, which is pretty awesome. And some of them didn't want to be on the website, so not all 36 are on the website. Just the only people we had them sign a consent form and stuff. And then we actually presented the people that did want to be included on the website. We had a little kind of a screening like for all campus, and probably like a good 30 plus people came, and we were able to have discussions about select clips. It was awesome. It kind of like allowed us to kind of be out there and present ourselves, and it's been a very awesome tool. Now, like in my fall in senior year, to kind of look back on that, having used that as an example to building on interfaith activity on campus. And actually, last night I just for the first time ever at Williams College, we had all the co-chairs and presidents of the different faith-based organizations together in one room at the same time.
Cesar, can I ask you just a question out of curiosity?
Yeah.
Williams, can you just roughly say what the breakdown of different faith groups is there? Who's represented? And
We've got a lot.
Okay.
So I did do the breakdown. I don't have it off the top of my head, but there's pretty big diversity. Obviously, Williams College is a small liberal arts college, so we've only got 2,000 students. So we've got like, I don't know, like something like, for example, like 30 Muslim students. But those 30 Muslim students like have a thriving like community. And so
Absolutely.
and
Right.
so that's kind of like the same. You see that in like different, like the Williams Christian Fellowship has its own like very big population. Williams Catholic. We've got the Williams College Jewish Association. We've got a secular group on campus, and what else do we have? We just had this semester a sophomore. She actually started a Vedanta study group. So that's been
Wow.
really awesome to see. Yeah.
That is great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cesar and Katie and David, for starting us off there with some of the different ways that you've used RavelUnravel. I was really struck by a few things. First, this piece about it being accessible. I think that's something that I love about RavelUnravel, is that it is such a simple framework that can then be used in so many different ways in different contexts. Both David and, well, I think all three of you actually talked about RavelUnravel opening up a space to have those conversations about identity, to enrich those conversations in a non-confrontational setting. I think that's really important. And it being a safe space to have some of those discussions as well. So I'd be really interested at this point to hear about, were there any surprises? Were there any difficulties? Were there any challenges that you came across when you were trying to run your campaign? And how did you overcome
Yeah.
them? Go ahead, David.
Oh, sorry, I was just nodding to myself there. Yes, in fact, there was one really surprising complication. And, for the sake of this student's anonymity, I'm just going to give her the name Ray. Let's give her the name Ray. But when I gave this assignment, and when I give all of these assignments, I always try to have a backup assignment alternate, just in case there's something particular or touchy or concerning that I might step in, I might not be aware of. And when it came to RavelUnravel, a lot of students were into it. I mean, many students didn't want to present, didn't want to be on camera, but not because of the content or the topic, just because of some general digital shyness that, they're not shy on Snapchat or texting or tweeting, but when it comes to an assignment, they're shy here. But this one girl, Ray, came to me during my office hours and told me that she couldn't do the assignment because it might put her family in danger. That apparently they had recently emigrated to the United States to get away from a, shall we say, tight-knit religious community, and that by putting this online, even if it was anonymous to the point of just her first name and last name initial, she still had concerns that this could reach beyond the class and could, in fact, give away where they are. I came to also learn that in her specific case, in Ray's specific case, her family had, if it wasn't excommunicated, then had converted out of this group as they departed. So even if she was exploring her new or revised religious identity, it could jeopardize her. Now, this, I think, was a select case. I think RavelUnravel is a very safe environment. I don't think students are being put up to anything unduly threatening or that puts them in any way in harm's way. But as the instructor, I made sure that she felt comfortable to take this alternate assignment. She, in fact, chose to record a presentation just for me, just one that I would view online privately that is not in the Ravel RavelUnravel database, and I learned fascinating things about her background, and saw that she really was thinking deeply about what her religious identity and personal identity were now that she is in a whole new community, removed from this community that she grew up in. So that was a very particular circumstance, but it was quite eye-opening to me.
Mm.
Thanks, David. That's a great example, and I think it's important to be thinking about those practicalities when we're using something like a RavelUnravel campaign on a campus or in a community group. We ask generally that people only use their first name when they're uploading their videos, for that exact reason that you raised, David, so that people can have a greater degree of privacy, if not anonymity. Katie, Cesar, anything to add on challenges or difficulties that you faced and suggestions of how you overcame them?
Yeah, well, I'll just tell a story about a surprise that we had. So the original goal that we had going into it was a way that we can embrace and celebrate the diverse faith traditions on campus. Those were the kind of the most visible ones through Muslim Student Association and Halal, and we wanted to put them on the same platform as the Christian organizations on campus, which are everywhere, and kind of have this feeling of it's a very Christian sort of culture campus, and so we wanted to push up the minority traditions as well. And what actually ended up happening was that I think the best or the most interesting and most engaging stories that were shared were actually from secular perspectives and from secular students. And there are a lot of, and staff too, a lot of staff and faculty kind of came out as atheist or agnostic or secular humanist, and had just never kind of talked about that openly before, because the culture on the campus is not to talk about it. But I think probably we did 36 videos as well, I think, and I want to say like a good third were from secular perspectives, and it was just kind of, they were just so excited that they were included in this event, and we were very, we made sure in our promotion, like non-religious perspectives as well, like non-spiritual identities, all welcome, like please come share your story, because even if you're not religious, you have some influence from that world.
Right.
So that was really interesting. And then the other cool thing that happened was the Christian students that did come and share their story, I think, shared something that a lot of the other traditions wouldn't have expected. And so the experience that the Christian students shared was one of like, when I say I'm a Christian on this campus, that comes with a lot of baggage. And there's a lot of assumptions that are made about me. If I say I'm a Christian, like people will assume I'm homophobic or that I am going to try to convert them. And that's just not the case. And that's not what I want people to understand about what it means to be Christian. And what I actually view Christianity as something very different. And so it ended up being a platform for Christian students and secular students, staff, and faculty to share their story to the diverse traditions as well.
Thanks so much for that, Katie. I think a couple of really important points there. So firstly, one of the things that I really appreciate about the way that RavelUnravel is set up is that you can choose how you identify yourself. And I think that piece is so important, isn't it? Being able to say, within the category of Christian or within the category of non-religious or within the category of Hindu, this is how I identify personally. So we have a whole range within those different categories. For example, within the agnostic category, we have people who identify as agnostic/atheist, we have agnostic Jew, we have not religious, we have Christian agnostic, we have spiritual. So opening up a space for those conversations and to have those deeper explorations of identity, I think, is a really key part of RavelUnravel. And the second point there about it being a space for people to challenge some of those misconceptions, those stereotypes, those things that people feel, oh, well, I am a this, but I really want you to know that I am actually this or I'm actually not this. And one of the questions that we ask people, that we invite people to answer in their video is, what is a stereotype that impacts you based on your identity. And some of the things that people have shared have been really deep and really profound reflections. Cesar, anything to add?
Yeah, I think along the lines of Katie, I think that we got yeah, probably like a third of also of students who were ambivalent about religion or hadn't really thought about religion, um, uh, and didn't like to like coax them a little. This is their value, their opinion, their voice was valued just as much as anyone else, and yeah, they had very.
Cesar, I was one of those students. Can I just point out that I was one of those students back in the day? I was not this functional, intelligent human being that you see now. I was very adverse to religion, so I think I should have appreciated people like you.
No, I'm just glad that they decided to come out and talk. And so yeah, and so that was pretty surprising. And then another thing was just how do I say it? They were just like very, very glad that this space was being provided for them. It wasn't something that I had really thought about. Like I knew like I wanted to create a space for this to happen, but the like response that I got was overwhelmingly positive. Everyone that interviewed was really, really excited that this was happening. They were like seemed to have been waiting for something like this to happen. So very glad that the response was so much more positive than I imagined. You know, I thought people would be like, "Oh, this is so cool. Oh, this is great. Thanks for doing this." But it was like really like, "Thank you. Like I've wanted to talk about this for a while now, and like this was like I'm really excited that Williams is like this open liberal place where we are encouraged to talk about our views on faith or religion."
Yeah, absolutely. No, such an important point. Thank you, Cesar. So when we started RavelUnravel back in 2012, we initially thought we might get maybe 150 videos. We launched the site with about 750, and we just passed 1,100 videos last week. So I can really relate to that idea of when you open up a space, when you give an opportunity for people to share those reflections and to share those important pieces of their identity, that the response can really be fantastic. So thanks for that. So we've heard a bit about why you wanted to run a campaign. We've heard a little bit about how it actually worked out. So looking back, reflecting on the experience, how do you think it went? What impact did it have on you, on your campus, on your community, and on those who took part in it? We already heard some reflections, some examples there of specific experiences that people had, or particular things that people took away. But what do you think has been the broader impact that it's had in any way on your campus? And I'll open that up to any of you.
Well, this kind of feeds off of what Cesar was just talking about, but I think the biggest impact that was made on Grand Valley's campus was just the symbolism of hosting this event, and students and staff and faculty started to see that, oh, this is something that the Grand Valley community cares about talking about and embracing. And I think that, especially since it was sort of this silent, no one talked about faith or not faith very openly before that, just having kind of a stamp of approval that like this is something that Grand Valley is going to prioritize. I think actually is probably, it still has ripple effects into what we're seeing this year with a lot more students engaging in interfaith work. The administration is working on inclusive prayer and meditation spaces. And I think a lot of that is, a lot of the movement for more inclusivity on campus is, I like to think that some of it comes from just that visual representation of the diversity that we have on campus that RavelUnravel provided for us. So I think that's the largest part of the impact that we had. And plus, the idea of RavelUnravel being an all-inclusive, identify yourself, we won't put you in a box sort of thing, really about the framework for what we think interfaith is. And that was something that was pretty easy to communicate to students then, because they saw what RavelUnravel was, and then they started to understand what interfaith is all about. It's about coming to the table with your own identity and just engaging in conversation.
Great point. Thanks, Katie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think very very to what Katie was saying. I guess one of the things that has happened is Williams is doing is planning its next fundraiser and seeing what else can be built. And so I was invited to take part in a religious self-study committee on just like how to use spaces on campus and how to help the like faith experience, or not experience, but like community. What are certain things that we need in terms of space? And so I think right now looking at our chapel, our kind of like huge Gothic Catholic church, and how to use that space to be a little more inclusive, basement areas and stuff. So that's been opening up those discussions, as well as just getting the chairs together from these different student groups together and in one space like we did last night was, I think, unprecedented and very very exciting too, because we all kind of fall into like the little trap of, oh, like this is great and I would love to like co-sponsor this with this group, or like I'm thinking of doing this, and then would your organization be on the same page? But it's all like isolated little events, and so trying to create a space where these conversations are organic, and that each co-chair, each president, each leader knows each other by name and talks to each other on like on a consistent basis. And so I think we've established that and are moving to like a bi-weekly kind of every 2 weeks meeting, just like move forward, like taking on big events. And I think we're at a moment where like we can affect the history of this campus.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Cesar. I think we have lost David for a moment. I think his connection just went out, so he should be rejoining us in a second. I wonder if we could just dig slightly deeper into this piece around opening up space on campus or in your community. Just to think a little more about how did you find running a campaign and having the resource of other people's videos or some of the background materials about different faiths and traditions on the RavelUnravel site. How have they been helpful, if they have been helpful, in doing that piece of opening up that space? And Cesar, you talked also earlier about sustainability, thinking, well, how can we move from having a one-off event here and a one-off event here to something that has more of a whole campus feel? Do either of you have any other reflections on how RavelUnravel feeds into that piece?
I think what RavelUnravel does, one of its strengths, is that it creates a very visual collaboration between people of different traditions. And like Cesar, what I was thinking of when you were talking about the chairs of the groups getting together, like even if people that are in these leadership positions are getting together for a social event, I think that collaboration that comes about really naturally, organically, like you were saying, is a really good starting off point, because then you're not necessarily just like emailing another student president or something for this very particular goal, but you're actually building a relationship with someone, and then from there collaboration happens. And I think that RavelUnravel, just in our experience, did bring together those people and introduce them to each other, and not necessarily the chairs of organizations, but just people from the different traditions that got to meet and talk to each other for the first time, and had that opportunity for whatever they wanted to take out of it could be taken out of it. So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, if we're talking about trying to get into, opening up spaces, it's exactly what you're saying. Like, it's not just one-off events. It's organic, and that's what we want to do. And so, in this kind of like attempt at creating sustainability, we're also trying to involve the chaplains as well. So though this is a student organization, like I think that we will all graduate eventually, hopefully, and the chaplains will be there after we're gone. Like having that sort of like mentorship, kind of like through the like coming years, would be huge. And also just like thinking about like us as a group itself, like Interfaith, and like what our role is there, and like how we should approach it, because we do want to become like an umbrella. We want to become an umbrella group of some sorts without like any kind of bureaucracy. So like, how do you handle that, and like how do you handle being your own group that does its own events, but then also being like a facilitator between all these other chairs or groups. And so we just had our first meeting last night. So like we're still trying to figure out how that'll work exactly.
Yeah. Thanks, Cesar. So thinking about your experiences running the campaigns that you ran, the feedback that you got, the impact that you feel it's had, what advice would you give to someone who wants to run a campaign? Whether that's a really practical piece of advice, whether that's a conceptual piece of advice, what advice would you give to those who are interested in running campaigns? Because I know we have a few people on the call who are in that position.
So something that the way that we organized the campaign that ended up being one of the most meaningful aspects for me was making the campaign a partnership, not only between my office with our very obvious goals of interfaith, but with university libraries whose goal is to encourage conversation across differences, basically. And so I think they brought to the table things that I would have never thought of, with like the visual aspect of things, just the perspective they have in general for collaboration and for kind of like academic integrity and honesty, and they had a lens for how they were taking in these stories that really added to the videos themselves, because before a student would come and sit down, before the student would come and sit down and tell their story, we would talk with them, and it would be me kind of explaining from the interfaith perspective, this is what to expect. And then the video team that we worked with from university libraries was also there just to give their perspective. So I think that really helped make the videos each really unique and stand alone as valuable sort of pieces. And then the other thing that we really enjoyed, and this is kind of going off of Cesar's point of like chaplains are there for a while, like students are fleeting from campus. We really engaged with staff and faculty. We had quite a few professors and staff from different parts of campus come and be a part of it. And I think getting them to invest their time and invest their kind of passion into this project is going to help Interfaith sustain as a cross-campus dialogue for years to come.
Yeah, thanks so much, Katie. I think that piece about seeking out those partners, whether it's likely partners or what you might think of being unlikely partners, and thinking about ways that can then cross-pollinate the work that you're doing. Someone like a library may or may not be the first partner that you'd think of, but actually it sounds like that partnership really brought a lot to what you were able to do with RavelUnravel in a really interesting way. And that piece about working with staff and faculty, I'd absolutely echo. I think that's is a really important way, both of getting buy-in on campus during your campaign, and also for that sustainability piece, which Cesar was also talking about. I think David did rejoin us, but I think we have lost him again. Oh, there we go. David, can you see and hear us again? David, are you able to see and hear us again?
Yes, I can see and hear you again. Yes, it's a glorious day.
Fantastic. So we can hear you. We can see your photo, but we can't see you moving. So we can imagine that your photo is moving.
I'll shake my computer to animate it if you like. I had a colossal crash there for a moment. It was It was exciting in its own way, but really annoying in many other ways.
Well, we're glad that you could rejoin us, and the conversation, David, is thinking about both the impact that RavelUnravel had in a broad sense on your campus, in your community, and also any advice you have for someone looking to run a campaign, because I know we've got some people with us today who are interested in that.
I think I answered that second part better, frankly. One thing I would learn from my mistakes is that be prepared not to do one campaign, but to do two. That is to say that you'll have a number of people involved in the initial campaign, but then word will get around after the fact, or they'll speak with friends, or who knows, but it'll move through the grapevine such that if you don't have a follow-up ready to go, a follow-up date or a follow-up event, you'll really be missing out on what could be even more valuable participation. People who weren't as readily connected to the community that you initially targeted, surprising people that want to take part. Overall, I'd say that having at least a two-parter ready to go, it might be the best thing I could have learned from my one-part attempt.
Thanks, David. I think that's a really interesting idea to think about. Actually, how after you've run that campaign, how can people who've already been part of it continue to engage? Perhaps they could be your sort of street team. They could be your interviewers. They could be helping you edit. They could be helping you do outreach for a second campaign or a second part to a campaign, to once people can see the impact that it's having, or once people can see that actually it's much less scary than it sounds, or it's much easier than it sounds, and giving them the opportunity to engage like that. Really interesting point. Thanks, David. Cesar.
Yeah, no, I think the most, I guess on a very practical note in terms of advice is just like advertise so much. I think that's what advertise to everyone, advertise to anyone, and I think that's like one of the things that kind of gave us our more than doubling of what our expected total was. And I had thought of like making a part two. So we're thinking of having it of doing it like yearly, and just compiling that data to see how the campus culture changes and what type of people talk.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and maybe getting one of the professors here that does like whatever professors do, like look at that and just like able to like analyze that and see how responses differ year to year. And I think that advertising was probably the biggest thing we spent time on, just like a week and a half before. Because you'd be surprised, this college is only 2,000 kids, so it's a pretty tiny campus, but you'd be surprised as to how many things people just don't know about. And so if you're working on a campus that's like much larger, then you definitely have to advertise as much as you possibly can with as much like time as you can. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Cesar. That's a great point. And I love that idea of coming back to this every year and using it as to build up a snapshot of the religious and spiritual identity of students on campus, and then looking at that over time and seeing how that is changing or evolving, or how people are relating to their identity or expressing their identity in different words. When we were at the American Academy of Religion, which, David, I think that you said that's where you first came across this project.
That's right.
A number of people came up to us and said, this is just a fantastic resource of videos of people giving this snapshot of their identity, answering these same 4 questions each time, and they were looking at it almost as a data set, as something to look at, to build a picture of what religious and spiritual identity means, what it looks like on campuses and in our country and in our world. So thank you for that. At this point, I want to just give an opportunity for any of our guests on the call today who might have a question. Maybe something you want to know more about, maybe something for a particular presenter, or something that you are thinking about, or a question that you have around RavelUnravel. So I want to open up the space for any questions. Just a reminder, you'll need to unmute your microphone. So if you go to the top of the Google Hangout page, just up there, and click on the microphone symbol, which will be red at the moment to mean that it's muted, and click it to unmute it. So does anyone have a question they want to share at this point? Thanks so much.
Hi, it's Peggy from Santa Cruz. Hey, and sorry I missed the first part. I did what I could, but I'm okay. The Fender's not okay. The Nigerian rotary person, he's good. But yeah, it was an exciting morning so far. And so sorry I missed kind of the whole, probably the practical aspect of what do you actually do, which I'm sure Sean will explain more to me. How did you start it? How did you decide what focus to have, like the period of time? You know, I'm kind of, for me, I'm like, it's still abstract. And I'm thinking, what would you suggest as a first way to say, okay, should we choose one day to have, you know, how do you choose the focus? What was helpful?
Yeah, well, I can speak to that just for a second. I was still new to campus at this time, so I really relied on kind of people that I had known on campus to kind of tell me what time of the year would be best. And then we also had to develop the strategy of, do we want people to submit their own videos, or do we want a little bit of creative control in the sense that like there will be consistency between the videos and we'll have the same backdrop for all the videos. Because we had the resources to do that, to have that creative control, we decided that we would set up certain times during 1 week in March, which was, I think, our strategy was 2 weeks after spring break. So it wouldn't be the first week back from spring break because students would still be freaking out and busy, but maybe it would be a little more likely the second week back from spring break. And promotions-wise, that made sense too. And so we reserved the same space each day for different time periods each day. And we would set up for 2 or 3 hours, and we could take walk-ins. If anyone wanted to just come in, drop by for a few minutes and record their story. But then we also took not reservations. People would kind of, on a Google document, people would sign up for a certain time and say, I'll be here during this half-hour increment. And so we got a lot more people. The people who signed up on the Google Doc were much more consistent, and we didn't have as many walk-ins. And so the Google Doc, which was actually an afterthought for us in planning, ended up being really helpful because it kind of gave people the commitment to show up at that time. Yeah, and then we just had that consistency. You know, you can't do it today, that's okay. We'll be here tomorrow at this time. And so we were just always kind of there and available for them to come by.
Thanks, Katie. Anything to add, Cesar or David?
I assigned it. I had the flexibility to say, students, you will do it this week and upload it by then. So I wasn't nearly as creative as Katie.
Yeah, I think so. The way we did it was over a weekend. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, mostly Friday and Saturday. Just in the student center. You know, it's a combination dining hall and a combination offices and buildings and stuff. And so what we did was we booked 2 rooms, so we could do 2 at a time. We also had them sign up for slots, 5 to 10 minutes, what the problem we ran into actually was that we knew that we wanted to upload it on the site, and we knew that we wanted to do a certain type of screening. But how to differentiate people that didn't want to partake in that? So we had to come up with our own consent form. So that was like drafted like 10 minutes before we opened up signups. So that would have been helpful to do beforehand. But so we ended up booking 2 rooms, and both rooms had chalkboards behind them. So like we set up a chair for the chalkboard, and so before we started the interview, we told them, hey, like there's a reason there's a chalkboard behind you. Like you can use it as to like write something or to draw something to aid you in your storytelling, and you can like look back and do it. And some people did it. Most people didn't do it. Some people did. Some people actually said they wouldn't do it, and then as their interview progressed, we got up and just like started drawing stuff on the board. That was pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, it was that was probably a pretty awesome thing that we were able to do, was have that chalkboard behind.
Oh, thanks so much, Cesar. Yeah, that's a really great idea. And there's lots of different ways that you can be creative with the format. And an important point that you raised, I think as well, Katie, about, do you want to have a little bit of creative control? Do you want to have consistency? Do you want to have the same backdrop, the same lighting, the same editing if you choose to do any basic edits, putting someone's name at the start or something? Or do you want to have it completely open, that someone can independently upload their video using the campaign hashtag, and they can record it on their phone, on their computer, on a camera elsewhere, and then they can upload it themselves?
Sean, can I add that did add an interesting texture to my students' assignments? I mean, some of them, they were encouraged to present this as professionally as they could. We talked about good presentation guidelines, but I got the whole gamut of people standing in suit and tie or in a dress and slacks or whatnot. And then I got other people where I was getting the up-the-nose cam. I was getting the, yes, my name. I was sitting on their lap without question. Their dorm posters were right behind them. But that made it quite genuine, and I was able to determine what approach the student was taking from all those independent uploads.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, thanks, David. Well, thanks for that question, Peggy. Peggy, do you or anyone else have any further questions at this point for our presenters?
Another question: what do you feel motivated people the most to get involved? What things in your advertising? What did you say? What sparked their interest? Thanks.
I mean, we put out posters, we sent out emails, but the biggest thing was just personal interaction and like us as organizers to go out and talk to people and encourage them to come visit and come do one. So I think it was the personal interaction, the sort of relationship building component of it that was the biggest. And then they felt more comfortable too. If they saw the face behind the person who was running this event, they were more likely, I think, to come and be willing to share something so personal.
Yeah, I think I had I definitely used my board a lot. Could not have done it without them, because I don't think I'm a very creative person. So my publicist, she came up with pretty snazzy little lines. There was one. It was like, come out and share your feelings on like the big questions in life, like faith, religion, whatever you identify in. Like you can like atheist, agnostic, like devout or alien or something. That would kind of like drew people in, and definitely I couldn't have come up with that. So yeah.
Nice. Thanks, folks. Thanks for that question, Peggy. Any final questions or reflections from our guests today that you would like to pick the brains of our fantastic presenters? Anything else you'd like to ask? Okay, and I'm just checking. We had a couple of comments on social media, but we don't have any questions at this point. So, since we're moving towards the end of our time together, I want to ask for closing thoughts from our three presenters. You've given us so much insight into how this campaign feature ran in your own situation, in your own context. If you had to boil that down to one thing to remember when running a campaign, what would that be? What would you share with our guests today and those who are interested in running their own campaign?
I have one thought. If I had to boil it down, is try to remember that even though we're texting and we're YouTubing and Skyping and so forth, that discussing these matters electronically to a camera is probably pretty alien to people. Is probably a whole parameters they hadn't considered before. Now, I think that's instructive. I think that's awesome. I think that's what makes RavelUnravel so powerful. But just because you might be dealing with a technologically literate or technologically addicted population, this particular context may be new to them and may be kind of shocking. So be there, make it as comfortable an engagement as possible. Show them perhaps that you've done it already. Show them clips that have already gone up. Without influencing their answers, or just remember that, but not always used for this purpose.
Yeah, very much along the same lines. Yeah, it's faith and how you identify are very sensitive topics and very very difficult to discuss. So always, laying the foundation of safe space. This is giving the option of whether or not they want this to be put on the website, or maybe just use it for campus things. Making them feel comfortable, making them know that it's a space where there will be no judgment. And yeah, I think that thanking them afterwards for sharing those thoughts goes a long way. But yeah, everything else, yeah, fully agree.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think we've lost Katie. I think she might be having technical issues, so we'll see if she's able to rejoin us just before we close. I think those were such important points from both of you there. Remembering that even though the barriers to using a tool like RavelUnravel are hopefully very low, and we worked very hard to make the technological barriers low, remembering that actually for this to be the most successful, making it part of a broader relationship building project. I love what you've all been saying about using this as a jumping off point, using this as a starting point for deeper conversation, using it as an opportunity to open up and to enrich those conversations. But for those conversations to happen, it's really important to maintain a safe space, a comfortable space, and a space where people feel that they can share things that are so important and so personal to them. So a huge thanks to David, to Cesar, and to Katie. It was wonderful to hear more about your experiences using RavelUnravel campaigns. After today, I'll be sending some follow-up to all of you who've been on the call, and also to a number of people who have messaged me that they were trying to join us but weren't able to for various reasons. As I say, we have a recording which I'll share with you, and you'll be very welcome to share with others in your communities who might be interested to learn more. If you're thinking about running a RavelUnravel campaign, I would strongly encourage you to do so. I think it's a really fantastic tool, and part of my role at Project Interfaith is to be available to support people who want to do that. So if you have any questions, if you want further information or resources, I would love to hear from you. My information is on the website where you signed up for this webinar. I'm Sean at projectinterfaith.org. So on that note, I will say another huge thank you to our presenters, to all of our guests for joining us. Look forward to seeing you on RavelUnravel.com and on future Google Hangouts that we hold. Thank you so much, and have a great day, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you, Sean. Take care.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Caesar. Thanks, Peggy. Lovely
Bye-bye.
to see you. Thanks,
Thank
Sarah.
you. Great.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Tom.
everybody. Great to meet you.
Take care, everyone.